The void between stars held no mercy for the weak. Commander Zethkar of the Hegemony scout vessel Silent Observer had learned this truth across 3 decades of deep space reconnaissance. His 4 eyes tracked the holographic display floating before his command chair, each pupil dilating independently as he processed the impossible readings. Commander whispered his sensor operator Vexili, her voice trembling through the ship's communication grid, the energy signature. It doesn't match anything in our databases. Zethkar's chitinous fingers clicked against his armrest in a nervous pattern. The Hegemony had cataloged over 12,000 starfaring species across the galaxy. Their databases contained the technological fingerprints of every known civilization, from the primitive chemical rockets of the Terran colonies to the quantum, full drives of the ancient architects. But this was different. Distance to the anomaly, Zethkar asked, his secondary voice box adding harmonic undertones of authority to mask his growing unease. 47,000 kilometers in closing, sir. The object appears to be ... drifting. Through the view screen, space seemed empty, except for the distant glow of a red dwarf star. But the sensors told a different story. Something massive lurked. Out there, something that shouldn't exist. Enhance long-range visuals, Zethkar commanded. The main display shimmered. And suddenly the darkness gave birth to a nightmare. The ship that materialized on their screens defied every principle of civilized starship design. Where other species built vessels of flowing curves and elegant efficiency, this thing was a monument to brutality. Angular surfaces jutted from its hull like broken bones. Weapon ports scarred its surface in numbers that made Zethkar's minds real. The entire structure looked less like a ship and more like a predator frozen in metal and composite. By the first mothers, breathed Vexili. What kind of species builds something like that? Zethkar studied the readings flowing across his screens. Vessel measured nearly 2 kilometers in length, bristling with technologies his instruments could barely comprehend. But what disturbed him most was the silence. No energy signatures, no life signs. The ship drifted through space like a tomb. Sir, his tactical officer, Krent H., spoke up from his station. I'm detecting residual heat signatures on the hull. This ship was recently in combat. Combat. Zethkar's 4 eyes focused on the tactical display. Show me. The enhanced scans revealed the truth in horrifying detail. Massive gouges ran along the ship's armored flanks. Hull breaches had been hastily sealed with what appeared to be compressed metal. Entire sections showed signs of intense heat damage, the kind that came from close-range plasma weapons, but the ship still flew. Somehow, despite damage that should have torn it apart, the alien vessel maintained its structural integrity. Commander Vexili's voice carried a note of scientific excitement mixed with fear. I'm detecting some kind of automated beacon transmitting. From the vessel, it's broadcasting on multiple frequencies. Can you decode it? Partially, sir. The mathematical structure suggests it's a distress signal. But there's something else. Something that doesn't make sense. Zethkar leaned forward in his command chair. Explain. The signal includes biological markers, DNA sequences, brain patterns, chemical compositions. Like they're advertising what they are. If they want to be found, a chill ran through Zethkar's exoskeleton. In 40 years of space exploration, he had never encountered a species that broadcast their biological data to unknown contacts. Such behavior violated every survival instinct. Evolution should have programmed into a starfaring race. Sir Krent interrupted. I'm reading massive power fluctuations from the alien vessel. Something's happening. On the screen, lights began flickering along the ship's hull. Emergency systems, perhaps, or some kind of automated revival protocol. Deep within the vessel's interior, energy patterns danced like fireflies in a dark forest. They're waking up, Vexili whispered. Zethkar felt his breathing tubes constrict. First contact protocols demanded caution, detailed scanning, and consultation with the Hegemony Council. But something about this vessel, something about the way it hung in space like a sleeping predator, made him hesitate. Begin full spectrum analysis, he ordered. I want to know everything about these creatures before they know we're here. Sir Vexili said, her voice barely audible. Are you certain? Deep scanning an unknown vessel could be considered an act of aggression. Zethkar stared at the alien ship, at its weapon-heavy design and battle-scarred hull. Whatever species had built this monster, they clearly understood aggression better than most. "Do it," he commanded. "But maintain stealth protocols. If these aliens are as dangerous as their ship suggests, I want to know what we're dealing with before they know we exist." The silent observer-S scanning arrays hummed to life, penetrating the alien vessel's hull with waves of exotic radiation. Data began flowing across the screens in torrents, revealing the internal structure of the mysterious craft. What they found would haunt Zethkar for the rest of his life. Chapter 2. The horror within the first scans revealed the ship's basic layout, and Zethkar immediately understood why the vessel had survived damage that would have destroyed any civilized craft. The alien ship wasn't just armored, it was layered like an onion. Its multiple redundant hulls, backup systems for the backup systems, and a structural design that seemed to assume catastrophic damage as a routine occurrence. "Commander," Vexily said, her voice strained with concentration, "I'm reading multiple weapon systems throughout the ship. Not just external batteries, but internal defensive grids. It's like they expected to be boarded." "How many crew?" Zethkar asked. "That's difficult to determine, sir. The ship appears to be designed for a complement of approximately 800 beings, but current life sign readings suggest only 347 survivors." The implications hit Zethkar like a physical blow. The ship had lost nearly half its crew, yet it continued to function. What kind of species could absorb such losses and keep fighting? Sir Kranth called out, "I'm detecting something unusual about their technology. The power distribution system, it's unlike anything in our databases." "Show me." The tactical display shifted to show the alien vessel's energy grid. Instead of the efficient, centralized power systems used by all known species, this ship used something that looked almost organic. Power flowed through the vessel like blood through veins, with hundreds of smaller nodes working together to maintain the ship's functions. "It's redundant beyond any rational design," Krenth observed. "Even if they lost 70% of their power grid, the ship would still function at combat effectiveness." "What about their weapons?" Zethkar asked, though part of him didn't want to know. The answer made his exoskeleton crack with stress. The alien ship carried enough firepower to reduce a small moon to rubble. Kinetic weapons, energy arrays, missile systems and devices whose functions the hegemony computers couldn't even identify. But what truly disturbed Zethkar was the integration. Every weapon system connected to every other, creating a web of destruction that could bring overwhelming force to bear on any target. Commander Vexily said quietly, "I'm reading the biosignatures of the surviving crew, and they single quotes are ... Unusual, sir. Carbon-based, like most intelligent species. But their physiology is ... aggressive. High muscle density, redundant organ systems, enhanced reflexes. Their brain chemistry shows elevated levels of compounds associated with persistence hunting and pack behavior." Zethkar studied the biological data flowing across his screens. These aliens were built for war. Their entire evolutionary history seemed focused on conflict, survival, and the ability to keep fighting even when severely damaged. But that wasn't the worst part. Sir Vexily continued, her voice growing smaller. "I'm detecting something else. In their biosignatures, they injured. Badly. Some show signs of radiation poisoning. Others have lost limbs, and several display brain trauma that should be fatal. But they're still alive? Not just alive, sir. They're still functional. Still at their duty stations. The ones who can't walk are being carried by their companions. But they refuse to die." Zethkar felt his breathing become labored.
"What kind
of species continued to fight with injuries that would kill any civilized being?" Commander Krenth said urgently, "I'm reading something from their computer systems. Some kind of digital record. Should I attempt to access it?" Every instinct told Zethkar to maintain distance, to report back to the hegemony, and let others decide how to handle this situation. But his scientific curiosity, the same trait that had made him an effective scout, demanded answers. "Do it, but maintain firewalls. I don't want their systems contaminating ours. The alien computer network proved surprisingly easy to penetrate. Unlike the paranoid security systems used by most species, these aliens seemed to believe in open information sharing, even with potential enemies. Their databases opened like books, revealing the story of their civilization, and what a story. It was Sir Vexili whispered, according to their records. This species calls itself ... humans. And Commander, you need to see this. The main display filled with images from the human database. Worlds burning under orbital bombardment. Fleets of ships like the one before them, engaging in battles that span star systems. Entire civilizations reduced to cosmic dust by the relentless advance of human expansion. But it wasn't conquest. The records showed something far more terrifying. They're defending themselves, Zethkar realized with growing horror. Every battle, every campaign, they're fighting for survival. Human records painted a picture of a species under constant threat. They had emerged into a galaxy filled with hostile aliens, parasitic entities, and cosmic horrors that viewed humans as either prey or obstacles. Where other species might have sought peace, might have tried to find some accommodation with their enemies, and the humans had chosen a different path. They had chosen to become more terrifying than the things that hunted them. Commander Vexili said, her voice barely audible. There's more, much more. According to their historical records, this ship isn't part of their main fleet. It's a scout vessel. Command bridge fell silent, except for the humming of life support systems. If this monster, this 2-kilometer weapon platform bristling with enough firepower to sterilize a world, was merely a scout ship, ... double quotes, what about their main fleet? Zethkar asked, though his voice cracked as he spoke. Vexilia's tentacles trembled as she worked her controls. Sir, according to their navigation logs, the human home fleet consists of over 40,000 vessels. And that's just one fleet they have. They have dozens of them. Zethkar's 4 eyes widened in terror. The hegemony, the most powerful military force in the known galaxy, fielded perhaps 3,000 combat vessels across all their territories. The humans had more ships in a single fleet than the hegemony had built in 10,000 years of civilization. But, Sir Kreneth added, there's something else, something that doesn't make sense. According to their records, they've only been a spacefaring species for less than 500 years. The implications staggered Zethkar. In 5 centuries, these humans had built an armada that dwarfed every known military force in the galaxy. They had gone from primitive planet-bound creatures to the most dangerous species in known space in less time than it took most civilizations to develop basic interstellar travel. How? Zethkar whispered. The answer came from the human ship's medical logs. As Vexili accessed the data, images flashed across the screen that made even the hardened scout commander recoil in horror. Humans didn't just fight their enemies, they adapted to them. Their medical records showed genetic modifications, cybernetic enhancements, and biological alterations that allowed them to survive in any environment, overcome any obstacle. They had turned themselves into living weapons. Sir, Vexili said, her voice shaking, there's one more thing, something from their recent battle logs. What is it? They won, sir? Whatever they were fighting, they won? Chapter 3. The True Terror. The battle logs from the human vessel painted a picture that defied belief. The ship's designation was UTS Relentless, and its recent engagement had been against what the humans classified as a Class 7 existential threat. Zethkar had never heard of such a classification system. But as Vexili translated the human records, the meaning became terrifyingly clear. Sir, according to their database, a Class 7 threat represents an enemy capable of ending all human life in the galaxy. The logs indicate they encountered something called the void-consumed entities that exist partially outside normal space-time. The tactical recordings from the battle showed horrors that violated the laws of physics. Creatures of living darkness that could phase through solid matter. Weapons that fired projectiles backwards through time. Ships that existed in 17 dimensions simultaneously. Against such nightmares, any sane species would have fled to the farthest reaches of the galaxy and prayed for quick deaths. The humans had charged straight. Into the heart of the enemy formation? Show me the engagement data, Zethkar commanded. His voice barely steady. The main screen filled with a three-dimensional recreation of the battle. The UTS Relentless and 43 other human vessels had engaged a force of over 200 void-consumed entities. The aliens' weapons carved through reality itself, deleting entire sections of the human fleet from existence. The humans responded by doing something no civilized species would ever consider. They weaponized their own deaths. Commander Vexili said, her voice filled with awe and terror. The humans... When their ships were destroyed, they didn't just die. They set off some kind of exotic matter bombs that created cascading dimensional tears. They turned their own destruction into weapons against the enemy. Zethkar watched in stunned silence as the battle unfolded. Ship after ship of the human fleet died in blazes of glory that took dozens of void-consumed entities with them.
What?
For every human vessel that fell, 2 more seemed to take its place. They weren't just fighting. They were multiplying during the battle itself. How is that possible? Krenth asked. The answer lay in the human manufacturing logs. Their ships weren't just weapons, they were mobile factories. Even during combat, the UTS Relentless had been producing ammunition, replacement fighters, and fully autonomous combat drones. The humans had turned warfare into an industrial process, but the most terrifying revelation came from the personal logs of the human crew. Sir Vexili said quietly, I'm accessing individual crew records. You need to hear this. The voice that emerged from the speakers was distinctly alien, harsh, guttural, but unmistakably intelligent. The universal translator struggled with the concepts being expressed. Personal log. Chief Engineer Sarah Chen, Day 47 of Operation Midnight Sun. We've been fighting the void consumed for 6 weeks straight. Lost my left arm yesterday. When a phase beast manifested inside engineering, Doc says he can grow me a new one, but honestly, the cybernetic replacement works better anyway. The thing is, we're winning. Not because we're stronger than these nightmares, we're not. We're winning because we refuse to stop. Jenkins died this morning when his station exploded, but he kept working for 17 minutes with a piece of shrapnel through his brain. 17 minutes. Long enough to get the quantum resonators back online. The void consumed don't understand us. They're used to species that run when faced with extinction. But we're not most species. We're humans. And humans don't run. End log. The recording ended. Leaving the bridge of the silent observer in stunned silence, Zethkar's foreminds struggled to process what he had heard. These creatures, these humans, fought with an intensity that bordered on insanity. They embraced death as a tactical option, treated horrific injuries as minor inconveniences, and continued fighting long past the point where any rational being would surrender. Commander Krenth said slowly, There's something else. I've been analyzing their tactical doctrine, and I think I understand why they broadcast their biological data. Explain. It's not a distress signal, sir, it's a warning. They're telling anyone who finds them exactly what they are, exactly what they're capable of. They want potential enemies to know what they'll be facing. Zethkar felt his exoskeleton begin to crack under stress. The humans weren't just dangerous, they were proud of being dangerous. They advertised their lethality like a territorial display. Sir Vexili said urgently, I'm detecting new activity aboard the human vessel. Multiple life signs are converging on what appears to be their bridge. I think they're preparing to resume operations. On the tactical display, the UTS Relentless began to show signs of renewed activity. Power flowed to weapon systems. Engine temperatures started to rise. The damaged sections of the hull began repairing themselves with some kind of adaptive nanomaterial. They're rebuilding, Zethkar whispered, in real time. But the most disturbing development came from the ship's communication array. A new signal began broadcasting on multiple frequencies, not the automated distress beacon, but something far more sophisticated. Sir Vexili said, her voice tight with fear, They're scanning us. The human sensors probed the silent observer with an intensity that made their own scanning attempts seem primitive by comparison. In seconds, the aliens had mapped every system on the hegemony vessel, cataloged its weapons, analyzed its crew, and transmitted the data back to their own computers. Evasive maneuvers, Zethkar commanded. But it was too late. The humans had found them. On the main screen, the UTS Relentless began to turn, its massive bulk rotating with impossible grace. Weapon ports aligned with surgical precision, and targeting sensors locked onto the hegemony scout ship. Then something happened that would forever change Zethkar's understanding of the universe. The humans opened a communication channel. The face that appeared on the screen was unlike anything in the hegemony databases. Bipedal, bilaterally symmetric, with forward-facing predator eyes and a mouth filled with sharp teeth. But what struck Zethkar most was the intelligence behind those eyes. This was no mindless beast. This was a thinking, reasoning being that had chosen to become a monster. Unknown vessel, the human said in perfect hegemony standard. This is Commander Elizabeth Torres of the United Terran ship Relentless. You have been scanning our vessel for the past 14 minutes. State your intentions. Zethkar's mind reeled. Not only had the humans detected their stealth vessel, they had learned to speak hegemony standard during the brief time they had been observed. Their computer systems had cracked a language that had taken hegemony linguists centuries to develop. We are a peaceful research vessel, Zethkar managed to say. We detected your distress signal and came to offer assistance. The human's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind her eyes. Amusement, perhaps, or pity. Assistance, she repeated. That's considerate. Tell me, Commander. Yes, we know your rank and name. Zethkar of House Valtheri? What did you discover during your scan of our vessel? The question hit Zethka like a physical blow. The humans hadn't just detected their scanning. They had allowed it. It wanted to be studied, wanted potential enemies to understand exactly what they were dealing with. Double quotes, we found. Evidence of your recent battle, Zethkar said carefully. Your crew showed remarkable resilience. Commander Torres smiled, and the expression sent chills through Zethkar's exoskeleton. It wasn't an expression of happiness. It was the smile of a predator that had just cornered its prey. Resilience, she said. Yes, that's one word for it. We prefer stubbornness. You see, Commander, we humans have a saying, if you're going through hell, keep going. We've been going through hell for 500 years now. We've gotten quite good at it. On the tactical display, more human ships began to appear. They materialized out of what seemed like empty space, their stealth systems far superior to anything the hegemony possessed. In minutes, the silent observer found itself surrounded by dozens of human vessels, each one bristling with enough firepower to reduce a planet to ash. Now, Commander Torres continued, here's what's going to happen. You're going to return to your hegemony council and deliver a message. Tell them that humanity has claimed this sector of space. Tell them that we are not interested in conquest, trade, or diplomacy. We are interested in being left alone. And if they refuse? Zethkar asked, though he already knew the answer. Commander? Torres's smile widened, showing more of those predatory teeth. Then they'll learn why we call ourselves the species that made fear itself afraid. Chapter 4. The price of knowledge. The journey back to hegemony space passed in a blur of terror and disbelief. Zethkar had commanded his crew to maintain strict communication silence, but he could see the fear in their gestures, hear it in their breathing patterns. The encounter with the humans had shaken them all to their core, but as the silent observer approached the outer perimeter of hegemony space, Zethkar realized that fear was the least of their problems. Sir, Vexili said quietly, I've been analyzing the human scans of our vessel. Commander, they didn't just examine our ship, they downloaded our entire database. Zethkar felt his exoskeleton crack with stress. Everything. Navigation charts, military protocols, population centers, technological specifications. Everything we know about the hegemony is now in human hands. The implications were staggering. In a single encounter, the humans had gained complete intelligence on the galaxy's most powerful civilization. They knew the location of every hegemony world, the capabilities of every ship class, the political structure of the government. Sir Krenth added from his station, "There's more. I've been monitoring subspace communications, and I'm detecting unusual patterns. It's as if something is probing our communication networks." Four eyes widened in horror. "Show me." The tactical display filled with a representation of hegemony communication traffic. But woven through the normal patterns of data flow were subtle intrusions, phantom signals that appeared and disappeared too quickly for normal sensors to detect. Someone or something was systematically mapping the entire hegemony communication. "Grid, how long has this been going on?" Zethkar asked. "Based on the pattern analysis, since we encountered the human vessel, sir, they're not just watching us. They're learning everything about us in real time." The scope of the human intelligence operation was breathtaking. While Zethkar had been struggling to understand their technology, humans had been effortlessly infiltrating every aspect of hegemony civilization. They weren't just dangerous. They were already inside the hegemony's most secure systems. Commander Vexley said urgently, "Incoming transmission from Hegemony Central Command." "Priority Alpha." Face that appeared on the screen belonged. "Too high, Admiral Morkith, Supreme Commander of the Hegemony Fleet." His expression was grim, his four eyes dilated with stress. "Commander Zethkar," the Admiral said without preamble, "return to base immediately. We've received ... disturbing reports from across the sector." "What kind of reports, sir?" "Other scout vessels have encountered human ships. All report similar experiences. Technologically superior vessels, impossible capabilities, and crews that display what can only be described as pathological persistence." "But, Commander, that's not the worst part." Zethkar felt his breathing tubes constrict. "Sir, they're not attacking. Every human ship encountered has allowed our vessels to escape unharmed. They seem to be ... studying us." The communication ended, leaving Zethkar alone with his growing dread. The humans weren't just dangerous, they were patient. They were conducting a systematic analysis of every species in the galaxy, cataloging strengths and weaknesses, mapping territories and resources. They were preparing for something. 3 days later, the Silent Observer docked at Hegemony Central Command, a massive space station that served as the military and political heart of their civilization. Zethkar found himself summoned before the full Council of Admirals, the most powerful beings in hegemony space. The council chamber was a vast sphere lined with displays showing the current status of hegemony forces across the galaxy. But as Zethkar entered, he noticed that many of the displays showed red warning indicators. Something was happening across their entire territory. "Commander Zethkar," High Admiral Morkith said as he took his place at the center of the chamber, "present your full report on the human encounter." For the next hour, Zethkar recounted everything they had discovered about the UTS Relentless and its crew. He described their impossible technology, their casual acceptance of death and injury, their ability to turn defeat into victory through sheer determination. When he finished, the council chamber fell silent. Finally, Admiral Yexthala, the eldest member of the council, spoke. "Commander, are you suggesting that this single human vessel could defeat a hegemony battle fleet?" Zethkar thought about the weapon systems he had seen, the redundant design philosophy, the crew that fought with pieces of shrapnel through their brains. "Admiral, I'm suggesting that this single human vessel could defeat our entire navy." Statements sent ripples of shock through the chamber. Several admirals began speaking at once, their voices creating a cacophony of disbelief and denial. But High Admiral Morkith raised a hand for silence. "Explain." "Sir, the humans don't fight. Like us? They don't fight like anyone. They've turned warfare into an industrial process, and they've turned themselves into living weapons. They don't seek victory, they seek the total elimination of threats to their survival. And they're very, very good at it." "Preposterous," Admiral Kexmar snorted. "No species can be that dangerous. Evolution doesn't produce perfect predators." "With respect, sir," Zethkar replied, "evolution didn't produce these humans. They produced themselves. It's every challenge they faced, every enemy that tried to destroy them, they adapted to. They turned themselves into something that could survive anything." "And they're coming here?" Admiral Yexthala said quietly. The chamber fell silent again. Through the vast windows of the station, the stars shone with their eternal light. Somewhere out there, human ships were moving through space with purpose and patience, studying every civilization they encountered. Sir Zethkar said carefully, "I don't think they want to conquer us. I think they want to know if we're a threat, and if they decide we are." Zethkar thought about the battle logs from the UTS Relentless, about a crew that had fought entities from outside reality itself and won. He thought about a species that had survived 500 years of constant warfare and emerged stronger from every conflict. Then we need to pray they give us the chance to surrender. 6 months later, the first human diplomatic vessel arrived at Hegemony Central Command. Came alone, unarmed, broadcasting messages of peaceful intent in perfect hegemony standard. But Zethkar knew the truth. He had seen what these creatures were capable of when threatened. The single diplomatic ship was more dangerous than any weapon the hegemony possessed, because it carried something far more terrifying than guns or missiles. It carried humans, and humans, Zethkar had learned, were the most dangerous force in the galaxy precisely because they didn't want to be. / Epilogue. The New Galactic Order *. 5 years after First Contact *, the Hegemony Council chamber looked much the same as it had. On the day, Zethkar first reported his encounter with the humans. The same displays, the same ceremonial architecture, the same powerful beings debating the fate of civilizations. But everything had changed. The quarterly reports are in, High Admiral Morketh announced to the assembled council. RC. Outer Rim has dropped by 97%. The parasitic collective has withdrawn from 12 star systems. And the void consumed haven't been seen in over 18 months. Admiral Yextala, now showing her age more than ever, nodded slowly. The human protection accords continue to prove effective. Zethkar, recently promoted to Admiral himself, studied the galactic map displayed at the center of the chamber. Green zones indicated areas under human protection. Yellow showed neutral space. Red marked the territories of species that had refused. To sign the accords, there wasn't much red left on the map. Admiral Zethkar, High Admiral Morketh said, "Your latest report on human activities?" Zethkar activated his personal display. They've established permanent outposts in 47 systems, all positioned to intercept potential threats before they reach inhabited worlds. Their patrol schedules are ... comprehensive. That was an understatement. The humans had positioned themselves as the galaxy's unofficial guardians, and they took the job seriously. Any species that showed aggressive tendencies toward others found themselves facing polite but firm human intervention. The results spoke for themselves. Galactic warfare had virtually ceased. Trade flourished as pirates and raiders discovered that robbing merchant vessels brought swift and overwhelming retaliation. Even the ancient cosmic horrors that periodically emerged from dark space had learned to avoid systems under human protection. "What about their population growth, Admiral?" Kexmar asked. Zethkar checked his files. "Steady but controlled, sir. They're expanding slowly, methodically. Each new colony is positioned to maximize defensive coverage for existing populations. They're not conquering, they're fortifying in their military strength." A question always made Zethkar uncomfortable. "Growing, sir. But not in the way we expected. They're not building larger fleets. They're building smarter ones. Each new ship incorporates technologies we barely understand. Their latest vessels make the UTS Relentless look primitive." The council absorbed this information in silence. The humans had become the galaxy's dominant power, not through conquest, but through sheer defensive superiority. They had made themselves so dangerous that no one dared attack them, and so useful that everyone wanted their protection. "Sir, Admiral," Yextala said quietly, "there's one more matter. The humans have submitted another proposal for the Council's consideration." High Admiral Morketh's expression grew troubled. "The Galactic Defense Initiative." "Yes, sir. They're proposing a joint military force, combining the best technologies and personnel from all allied species. The goal would be to prepare for threats from outside the galaxy." Zethkar felt his exoskeleton tighten. Outside the galaxy. According to human intelligence, There are indications of movement in the intergalactic void. Something large. Something that makes the void consumed look like a minor nuisance. The implications staggered the council. If the humans, who had casually defeated entities that existed partially outside reality, were preparing for something even worse. What do they want from us? Admiral Morketh asked. Admiral Yextala consulted her notes. Technical expertise, mostly. They particularly value our gravitational manipulation technology and our quantum processing systems. They're not asking us to fight. They're asking us to help them build better weapons. And if we refuse, they've made it clear that refusal is an option, sir. They would simply exclude us from the defensive grid when the time comes. Zethkar thought about the battle logs he had seen, about humans who fought with shrapnel through their brains and turned their own deaths into weapons. The idea of facing an external threat without human protection was unthinkable. I recommend. We accept, he said quietly. The vote was unanimous. Later that day, Zethkar stood in his quarters, looking out at the stars through his viewport. Somewhere out there, human ships patrolled the darkness, watching for threats that might not arrive. For decades or centuries, they were playing a game with stakes measured in galactic survival. And they were playing it with the infinite patience of a species that had learned to embrace death as a temporary inconvenience. A soft chime indicated an incoming message. The holographic display showed the face of Commander Torres from the UTS Relentless, now Admiral Torres, and commander of the Human Outer Defense Fleet. Admiral Zethkar, she said with that familiar, predatory smile. Congratulations on the Council's decision to join the Galactic Defense Initiative. I look forward to working with you. Admiral Torres, Zethkar replied carefully. May I ask you something? Of course. When we first encountered your ship, you seemed amused by our fear. Did you enjoy terrifying us? Torres's expression grew serious. Admiral, we didn't want to terrify you. We wanted you to understand us. Breeds respect, and respect breeds cooperation. We learned long ago that it's better to be feared and trusted than loved and betrayed, and now we do what we've always done, Admiral. We prepare for the next fight. The difference is, this time, we're not fighting alone. The transmission ended, leaving Zethkar alone with his thoughts. Outside his viewport, a human patrol ship glided past, its hull scarred by battles against enemies the hegemony couldn't imagine. It moved with purpose and confidence, carrying its crew of impossible, stubborn, beautiful monsters toward whatever darkness awaited them. For the first time since his encounter with the UTS Relentless, Zethkar felt something other than fear. When he looked at a human vessel, he felt hope. The humans had spent 500 years learning to be the most dangerous thing in the galaxy. Now they were teaching everyone else to be dangerous too, and given what was coming from the dark between, galaxies that might be exactly what the universe needed.